Hello. Um, I think people are being let in. Are we seeing attendance pop up? We're seeing that. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is being recorded, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Um, Thank you for joining us today. Just a quick note again, before we dive in, this presentation is being recorded and we're going to post it on the Community Challenge Grants website for your reference and for people who weren't able to make it today. I'm Robin Takayama and I oversee the Community Challenge Grants program, CCG for short. Behind the scenes, helping us with today's tech is Stephanie Romero from the Government Operations team. We're both part of the City Administrator's Office. So CCG provides city funding for community-led neighborhood improvement projects. We recognize our community's interdependence and collective strength and fund neighborhood beautification projects that foster resilience, safety, and belonging in San Francisco. This program mission came out of what we've experienced together in recent years, surviving a pandemic, ongoing climate challenges, and rising divisions. Through it all, our community showed up for each other with creativity, partnership, and mutual aid. This program is built to support and build on that strength. When I was creating this year's RFP, one thing I heard loud and clear was that people want city departments to work better together. And that's something we've taken to heart. You'll see that intention woven throughout the program, including in this workshop. The purpose of today's session is to help you understand the city's programs, permits, or approvals that CCG projects may need to work with. Get familiar with the permits, timelines, and potential costs so your application budget and work plan is accurate. And then learn how to get the required property owner letter signed, which is part of your CCG application. It's worth noting that permitting is a rapidly evolving area. The mayor's office is working on improving permitting processes. So while this workshop offers a helpful overview, you'll want to visit the relevant department websites for the most up-to-date information. This is part one of our permits and approvals workshop. Today, you'll hear from MTA about street closures and slow streets murals, the Arts Commission about public art, plaques, and projects on Arts Commission property, and Public Works with their exciting new Love Our Neighborhoods permit, greening, and cleanup. Part two happens this Thursday, and it'll include Rec and Park, the Port, folks overseeing shared spaces and signage, PUC, and SF Unified. We want to hear your questions. Use the Q&A feature in Teams. Please include details in your questions, things like project location or scope, because they help the departments give you more accurate answers. We may not be able to respond to everything live, but we'll post responses to all questions on Mondays on the CCG website. Today is a starting point. If you have technical questions about your specific project, like whether a permit is needed or how to apply, please follow up directly with the department presenters. If you have questions about the CCG application and eligibility, feel free to email me at ccg@sfgov.org. Okay, thanks again for being here, and let's get started. I'm going to hand it over to SFMTA.
All right, I think I'm going to kick this off. I'm Mark Drager. I'm the program manager for the Slow Streets program at the SFMTA. We have a very specific pilot program for doing street murals specifically on slow streets. So I'll walk you through where the slow streets are in San Francisco and what the process is for our pilot program to get murals on the street. And then, of course, happy to answer any questions. So our slow streets, if you're not familiar, are a network of streets that largely started during the pandemic. I say largely because that's when we started calling them slow streets, but we've been working on this concept for a while, the idea of residential streets that are slow, low volume, and able to be shared amongst a variety of street users, specifically folks that are riding a bike or walking or rolling. So some examples you may be familiar with in San Francisco or Page Street or Sanchez Street. Those are some of our most popular ones. And in 2023, we started a mural pilot program because we thought that we could take slow streets to the next level and allow the community to do the sort of thing that the city has never been that efficient at, which is working with artists or just developing a concept themselves for painting the street. We want our slow streets to be more than just about movement and transportation, but to express the community and express the spirit of the space. And I'll emphasize here that these are murals that are entirely designed and implemented and maintained by community members. And the role of the MTA is just to review them and make sure that there isn't a conflict with traffic control striping and that it can be done safely in the street. So our slow streets are here in purple. We have 18 of them implemented across the city. So this is Page Street over here. We have Sanchez. Those are very popular in Minnesota. It gets a good amount of energy as well. All of them are a little bit different. Some of them you're going to see some people walking the street. Some of them you're not. We have some street murals currently out there today on Lion and on Page. And we're having some coming to Sanchez soon. They're in Minnesota. They're on Hearst. I think that's all of them. So if you've been around and you want to see what that sort of looks like, here's what Lion and Page look like. These are pretty high caliber designs. We are definitely interested in communities that want to develop something that is a little simpler and can be done over a weekend. But the ones that we have on our slow streets today are very intricately designed by experienced artists. And the artists did a good amount of work to lay them out, and then the community would come in on the weekend and help, sort of paint by number. So we have some design guidelines. These are the sorts of things that we look at. We basically don't want things that would be confused for traffic control striping. We don't want somebody to come up with a mural that has something like a stop sign or an arrow on it or a person. We don't want to see words. We don't want to see anything about political campaign or logos. When you see it, insensitive images, copyrighted materials, these sorts of things. And then we're also not looking for things that would encourage people, especially children, to come out and play in the street. We're not ready to push on that just yet. So we're looking generally for pretty abstract things, unique colors that you wouldn't typically see on a street, and a driver wouldn't confuse, because these are still streets that are open for driving and for bicycling and other means of transport. We have an online document on the Slow Streets Program's website that goes into more detail, so you don't need to screenshot this, but we can also share the presentation. These are the general guidelines for spacing. So we are generally asking for 10 feet from things like a stop legend or from a bike sharrow, and then 3 feet from the curb. And the idea of the distance from the curb is that this is where the gutter or the water is washing. And if you paint right up to it, it's going to get dirty. The paint's going to come off. It's probably not where you want to be anyway. We're not currently, but for say painted safety zones, saying that they should be in intersections. That's something that we might look into in the future, but given that people are turning in intersections, we're a little bit concerned about that. But this is generally what we're looking for. I will note that not all intersections in San Francisco have a marked crosswalk, but there's still a crosswalk there. So consider the width of the sidewalk from the building edge to the curb line. We can help you with this. And that's in this case about 10 feet. In terms of materials, we do recommend using primer. We do require the use of an anti-skid material. There's a variety of things that you can use. I even think folks are sometimes using ground up pistachio shells that they throw into the paint. We don't want you to use retro-reflective paint. This is the sort of thing that our crews use for the traffic control striping, so we don't want to conflict with that. And then once it's out there, this is a mural that we're not going to maintain, but if you were interested in maintaining it, that would be great. But then you would need to go through a street closure permit process again to get out into the street safely and be able to do that work. There's always the chance that something is going to happen, and it could even happen a month after you put this mural in, and there might be a cut in the pavement because they need to get to a gas line or a water line. maybe it's an emergency. Part of the process, we're going to ask you to look at an online web tool that we can see and the public can see for what construction and excavation projects are expected. So that's sort of an acknowledgement in the coming years. This is what is expected for the street, and you probably want to pick a block where there isn't expected to be any sort of excavation. But again, it can happen at any time, and we have the right to remove this if we need to at any time. So let's go down the steps. It's generally a 3-step process, but I'm breaking it down here a little bit further. We want to work with you and just look at the feasibility. That first step is really important, just to have a conversation. Our staff are here to help you. And then when you submit the application, it's going to come through a lot better. The second big step is the Arts Commission. And you'll hear from those folks today on other topics. And then we'll have a separate, more specific presentation for the street closure permit. And that's the structure that we're using so you can get out of the street safely. And then you're going to paint. So let's talk about the first step. Always just send us an email, streetmurals@sfmta.com. Hey, we're interested in doing this. You know, we have materials online. If you're having trouble finding them, if you have questions, our staff are here to help you out. But we are happy to receive, as part of this feasibility check, just a very basic description of what you want to do, where you want to do it. You know, as much detail as you have. You know, having that back and forth a little bit up front is going to be helpful. It's only going to make it easier. We then would ask for an application. So there's that narrative description. You've already started it. You might expand it a little bit. Online, we have our street mural agreement. We're asking for a map. This fourth item here is that web map that I was mentioning earlier, the Public Works street resurfacing map that shows all the blocks that are going to get paved in the coming years. So take a screenshot of that, really just an acknowledgement for yourself that you see what's going on the street, what's expected. We're asking for some photos and an image or a mock-up of the mural. And then the last one is pretty important, and it's the idea of getting in touch with the district supervisor, the district supervisors for the street, and making sure that they're aware of this, and they're probably going to want to hear a little bit about who you're talking to, who you're working with. You know, we're not asking for a petition on a block, but this is our way of understanding and making sure that the community and the district is aware of this work and is generally supportive. And this has not been a problem so far. There have been several murals that have come through, so most supervisors know that this pilot program exists, but it is a conversation that you probably want to start sooner than later. And then you submit that application to us. It could be a little back and forth. We're working with folks on Sanchez right now, and we'll submit a few comments, and then they come back and they have a revised design. Once we are happy with it, we'll give you a letter of approval. And then you can move on to that next big step, which is going to the Arts Commission. So these are the items that you're going to need there, and some staff in the corner. You're going to hear from Paris today, I believe, or maybe Craig. So some sort of a signed letter from us, but then also if you're putting it in front of somebody's driveway and they're not going to have access for a while, probably best to get that documented as well. Good to get a little bit of information on the artist. I think there's some flexibility in this, but ideally that you can share some examples of what this artist has previously done, so that you get a sense of the quality and that they stand behind their work and they're going to be able to complete it. But there could be some flexibility here. We haven't had this just yet, but we are interested in community members, even youth, who are interested in doing some sort of art on the street, as long as, there's some sort of a commitment, or we can point to something they've done before. And then, of course, they want to see the mural design, the images, the same sort of things that we've asked for. And then there's an artist waiver as well. And then the third big step, once you've gone through the Arts Commission, is the special event street closure permit. Nick, I think you'd like to speak to some of these slides here. I'm happy to run through them since you have your own deck.
I can certainly speak to them. This is really just a version of what we do for all the street closures, so it'll be sort of the same thing. A little simpler, because for most of these, there's not going to be anything like booze or bouncy houses or anything. Probably just a table with some drinks, snacks, and table with paints and brushes. The key thing in coming up with a street closure that can get approved is going to be figuring out the painting schedule, because there will need to be an emergency access lane on the street. And so in theory, you could have, a police vehicle or an ambulance or something driving through your closure. And if there's wet paint there, that's not going to work well. So what we've done in other locations is, we do one side of the street and then the other side of the street. So there's always an emergency lane. The other aspect about, and this is going to determine finding a location for it, is that if there are driveways, the city is required to maintain access to people's garages. And so if you can get an agreement from somebody with a garage that they agree to sort of forego the use of their garage during the painting period, then that's great. But otherwise, you may need to find a location that does not have any garages opening off of it. And San Francisco, frankly, our residential streets, our slow streets, they have a lot of garages. So that has been, and I think Mark will back me up on that, that has been one of the challenges for this program. Hopefully, residents with garages will be happy to say, yeah, no, I can forego parking in my garage for a day or two while you do it. But that really underscores the value of coming up with a painting process that can be quick. Like someone might say, yeah, okay, I can forego my garage for Saturday, but not for 7 days a week or 7 days in a row. So coming up with that smaller, quicker to, or not necessarily smaller, but simpler, quicker to execute mural has that advantage as well. I think that's probably enough about that.
Yeah, I mean, Nick, some of these we'd love to see them be simpler, but they also could be smaller. So like the ones on Hearst and on 20th are a collection of much smaller pieces that I think took up less of the street and didn't overlap with driveways.
I mean, that's an excellent point. I mean, if there's a design that is aesthetically pleasing, that has chunks, like going down the street, so in between garages, and there you could think of something that was maybe more natural, like you just have some trees and bushes and so on. But you can also take a look at the one on Page Street, which is just east of Masonic in the Upper Haight. So that is a small one that was done in the area where there are fewer garages. And it's also now, I don't know, it's maybe a year old now. And so you can see the sort of thing that the wear that you would get on one. Although I should say that the wear is necessarily characteristic on Page for two reasons. One, there's no turning onto that area where the mural is off of Masonic. But also it is right where there is a bike share station, and the trucks that service the bike share station drive over the mural like a few times a day. So it gets perhaps not characteristic wear.
And then Nick, I think you'll probably cover a lot of this in your individual presentation on the approval process and the steps. Maybe we pass over it here. I'll note though that the slow streets portion of this, there is no permit fee. So it's just when you get to this special event street closure permit that you follow that structure that's been there for many years. And there's I think a graduated payment structure. You have a lower fee if you apply earlier, and then some lower rates are available if eligible for, I believe, nonprofits.
Yeah, and then again, there is a fee, and we should stress that these fees and so on, these are partial cost recovery fees for the city to partially cover the cost to the city of providing these various services. These are not a revenue stream, and they don't fully even cover the costs of providing these programs. But one of the costs is for no parking signage, which is necessary for most of these locations. And again, if it's smaller, then that is going to be a smaller fee. So that's another reason to not want to try and do the whole block.
And then you paint. A lot of these, so this is a piece on Minnesota Street. They took better part of 2 weeks. Very intricate. It's beautiful. And that's great if that's what you want to do. It's just that's a different scale in terms of how long you need to close the street and the cost of the mural and our review and all that. But we're also happy and glad to accept smaller pieces. Take a little bit less time. Can't stress that enough. And then in terms of maintenance, they are yours to maintain. If you want to go out there and retouch it or reinstall it after a few years, let's get in touch. You would need another special event street closure permit to be able to do that safely. And then we will try our best to let you know if our crews need to do anything, but there's always a chance that there's some sort of an emergency and they need to fix a broken pipe or a gas line or something like that underneath the mural, and they're not going to hesitate to break it up, unfortunately, because that needs to happen in some cases. So it seems complicated. We do, but it isn't really once you kind of get into it, and we do have that application guide on our website. So you go to sfmta.com/street murals. You can also get to it from our Slow Streets project. I'm Mark, and Nick and Diane are the special events team, and I think you're going to hear a little bit more from them about street closures.
Yeah, why don't we keep it rolling?
Oh, so just jump straight into street closures?
Yeah, go ahead. I
can
don't
do
see
that.
any questions yet.
Okay. Share my screen.
Oh, and just a reminder, so we're going to take questions if there is time for any by department. So, once we move on from MTA, they're going to hop off. So if you have any questions for Mark or Nick, we'll ask them after they present. And then if they bounce out and we start with SFAC, then you can always ask them directly.
All right. Well, my name is Nick Chapman. I manage street closures for special events for SFMTA, and so I've been doing that for a number of years. Oh, see somebody has a question.
Yeah, go ahead and put it into the Q&A.
Okay. And joining us on this call is my colleague, Diane Yee, who is a new but very welcome, new-ish at this point, but very welcome addition to my team. And between the two of us, we manage street closures, permit applications for everything from small residential block parties to beta breakers, things of that ilk. So I'm going to run through this because it may seem a little complicated. It's really not. I mean, we do hundreds of residential block party permits a year. For some of them, we've been doing them for some people for 40 years. They just do the same block party every year. One of my favorites is one in the inner Richmond, where they have a block party every year on the anniversary of the Loma Prieta quake, because all of the residents got out into the street when the Loma Prieta quake happened, and they've just been doing it ever since without the spur of an earthquake to make them come out into the street. So street closures with the street closure program that Diane and I administer, we can close pretty much any street. Market Street obviously being a bit of a challenge, Mission Street being a bit of a challenge. We don't like to close those other than for the obvious things. And in closing the street, we're actually opening it up for other kinds of uses, for block parties, barbecues, play streets, street fairs, and night markets being a kind of popular thing now, all manner of other community events and gatherings, large athletic events like the SF Marathon, and also film shoots. One of the last permits we did before the COVID pandemic locked things down was for the most recent Matrix film, which is very challenging for the city, but well worth it. The street closures are the program that Diane and I manage is an SFMTA team, but it's actually managing an interdepartmental committee, the Interdepartmental Staff Committee on Traffic and Transportation. which was created by the Board of Supervisors many decades ago, because the Board of Supervisors, prior to ISCOT's creation, had to review them themselves. And they sensibly thought, you know what, we'll just pass this off to somebody else. The committee consists of voting members, SFMTA, police, fire, public works, public health, the entertainment commission, and planning. Most of those are departments that are involved in nitty-gritty aspects of putting on these events. For example, providing barricades, cleaning the street, permitting food distribution, barbecues, that kind of thing. Are the hearings where we review these applications. They're public hearings. They're held twice a month, and they are entirely online, and have been since 2020. Some examples of some of the street closures that we do. Sunday Streets, one of the more obvious ones. Very happy to do that. Sunday Streets program is still not fully back from what it was prior to the start of the COVID pandemic, but is slowly kind of gathering momentum. There are night markets in Chinatown, the Sunset, the Castro. We do all the street fairs like Fillmore Jazz, Folsom Street, Castro Street, North Beach Festival, etc. Public school fetes. We do somewhere between like 20 and 40 trick-or-treat closures a year, which range in size from 1 block to about 8 blocks. And of course, we do hundreds of small block parties, which can be as small as like 20 people. Just the neighbors and their friends and family closing the street down. The kids run around or ride their bicycles around, and the adults sit around having hot dogs and chatting. And we love to do those. We would love to do more of them. This is a lovely video. Ooh, that was a little loud, sorry. I'll turn the volume down. This is an overview of the Outer Sunset Night Market. Gives you a sense of the kind of thing that can be done with these sort of street closures that we do. You can find that whole thing on YouTube if you want to see it. The process begins with you planning your event, and it can often be helpful to discuss that with us in the same way that the murals are. We can say, right away that what you want to do sounds fine or will not be possible because, for example, it's on Market Street, or advise you on ways to make your event easier and cheaper to put on. There's an online application process when you're ready to do that. And there's the public hearing, which we've discussed. We issue a permit, assuming it's approved by the committee. And then once you have your permit, there are additional permits and processes that you will need to complete that are based on the specifics of your event. Sometimes that can be getting a sound permit from the Entertainment Commission or getting no parking signs if that's needed for your event, that kind of thing. Then you have the event and you have a fun time, and maybe we show up and say hi. When you're ready to apply, after maybe having that initial discussion with us, you will come to a web page, and this is an example of what you'll see. This is the beginning of our primary street closure for special events webpage. There are 2 types of applications, of online applications. One for neighborhood block parties, which are very simple events and have a simplified application process. And then the other is just for everything else, which can range from small community events up to Matrix Film Shoot or the SF Marathon. Neighborhood block parties are small events put on by a resident of the block on which they're being held, or the resident, the neighborhood association in some cases. And they're meant to be for the residents of the block, their neighbors, their families and friends. They're restricted to 1 block, maximum of 200 people, maximum of 8 hours, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One thing to note is that the normal alcohol rules for the public right-of-way apply at neighborhood block parties. which I understand is frustrating for people who want to have barbecues and drink a beer. Drinking beer in your front yard or on your front steps is fine, but not in the street. Community events are probably one thing that many of the applicants here might be considering. These are, we have a special reduced fee for small community events, which is not much more than for a neighborhood block party and significantly less than for general special events. These small community events have to be 2 blocks or less, 500 people or less, etc. These restrictions are really about limiting the demands on city staffing and city processes. So these restrictions sort of outline or describe an event that requires very little additional work from the city. And that is how we justify charging that significantly lower fee. Examples of some of those include the larger trick-or-treat closures, school fetes, Bonadori, Dia de los Niños, Dia de los Libros, and things like that. Anything that isn't one of those is just a general special event, and that can be anything. You can charge for it. You can have any number of blocks. You can require muni reroutes, etc. Cost is something that people are always curious about. Our team has significantly reduced the cost of putting on neighborhood block parties from what they were, say, 8 years ago. They're now about a quarter of what they were 8 years ago. And not in adjusted dollars, but a quarter of what they actually were 8 years ago. And so you could put on a neighborhood block party for $56 for the permit. And then you'd have to get barricades, which maybe you know of someplace to get them, or maybe you have to rent them. And that would be it. Big events, $250,000 for some things, not unheard of for city costs, but a lot of that is basically hiring police and traffic control officers to manage the event. Most events, community events, are going to come in somewhere more in the $2,000 to $5,000 or less for the event. As Mark mentioned, the application fees are lower depending on when you apply. We encourage everybody to apply at least 90 days in advance, but we will accept an application up to 30 days prior to the event. In addition to the application fee, which is, I should stress, is an application fee, and it covers the work of reviewing the application, and it applies whether or not the permit is granted. But Diane and I, basically, if we see an application come in that we don't think is getting approved, we will call you up or email you and say, hey, we don't think this could get approved as it stands. So we really try to make sure that no one ever pays an application fee for something that the committee is not going to approve. And have been very good about that. I think in the last 8 years, I think there have been 3 applications that have gone to the public hearing that have not been approved. In addition to the application fee, other costs could be no parking, which could be $300 to $700 a block, a sound permit from the Entertainment Commission, fees for food booths, for barbecues and grills, significant fees if we have to impact Muni, and then if traffic control officers or SFPD are required, then those fees, the cost of that, providing that staff, has to be covered. But we work with events to try and figure out ways to do it with as few fees, as low cost as possible. In addition to the city fees and costs, an event can have other fees and costs which are required by the permit, required by city regulations, but which are not actually paying to the city. And that would be things like renting portable toilets, renting barricades, getting insurance. Most community events do not require insurance. Most community events, very few community events require medical assets. So while those do come up, they're not really things that most events will have to worry about. The application process is very simple. You go online, it asks for contact information, the location and dates and times that you want to close, and then some information on what you're going to be doing on the block, and then a site plan that shows the layout that you're going to have of the public street. Site plans tend to be one of the things that it's really probably the most complicated bit of the application. We have detailed information. There's a PDF on our website as well as written information there. I won't go through this, but the information online should tell you pretty much everything you need to know. Here's some examples of site plans that are good from our point of view. These are things, this is a site plan that somebody did. I think this one was maybe just done in Word. This one, I think, I'm not sure, maybe was done in PowerPoint. Another one maybe from Word. But we have even accepted handwritten, or I should say hand-drawn site plans done in pencil on paper, as long as they give us what we need to know. And when I say us, I mean not just Diane and myself, but the fire department, police department, et cetera. They give us what we need to know to evaluate the event. If your initial site plan is not good enough, we'll email you and say we need X, Y, and Z. And then there's just a process to get you to the point where we get a site plan that we can use. And we're very successful with that.
Time check. We've got
lastly,
like 2 more minutes.
Yeah, well, I'm all done. So I wanted to warn you, this is what we don't want, is me coming out and looking at an event and seeing unsafe conditions. And this is what we do want, is me coming out, being very happy and seeing a safe event. And that's it. I know I've rushed through that, but honestly, I think the best thing is really not to try and give you all the information you need here, but to give you a sense of it, to guide you in conversations that you might have with Diane or myself about your specific event.
All right.
So
Well,
that's
thank
it.
you. Thank you, MTA. And for the folks on the call, hopefully that was a little bit of inspiration, to see something new, like the Slow Street Mural program was piloted with a CCG grant. And then really you saw a lot of other costs involved, renting barricades, the sound permit, some of the safety expenses. And so those are things to keep in mind. They really spelled it out for you, things that you would want to make sure are included in your CCG budget. I am seeing that there's someone who wanted to ask a question and you're not seeing the Q&A option up above. So you can always email me at ccg@sfgov.org. And if I can't answer it, I'll find out from the people here. Ooh, I do see a question. Do we need an amplified sound permit in addition to block party permission?
Yes, for any event that will have amplified sound or entertainment does require a permit from the Entertainment Commission. For small community events and neighborhood block parties, the fees for that are often waived or reduced. And the process for that is very simple. There's a very quick online form. They will want to see a copy of the permit that Diane and I issue. And they also have a website where you can get more information and look into what they do to waive the fee.
Okay, so thank you, MTA. Appreciate you being here and great informational presentations. So next up is the Arts Commission. We're going to be hearing about Civic Design Review, which is for plaques and street amenities, public art approval, and then projects at the 4 city-owned cultural centers.
All right, great. Thanks, Robin. My name is Sarah Hollenbeck. I'm the Deputy Director of Finance and Administration with the Arts Commission, and I also staff the Civic Design Review program. So we'll go through a few of the highlights about the program, and then, as Robin mentioned, there will be other presenters on other topics from the Arts Commission. Let's advance the slide. So the Civic Design Review Program is a program that is the manner in which we carry out the San Francisco Charter mandate to the Arts Commission to review and approve the design of all public structures and any private structure that extends over or upon any public property, with some additional language there. So primarily Civic Design Review pertains to structures on public property, public structures, so structures constructed by the city, but in the context of this grant program, it would more likely that it would be a project that a community group or a neighborhood group wants to do that's on public property, and we'll go through a couple of examples of that. The Civic Design Review Committee is a subcommittee of the Arts Commission that consists of 5 commissioners, 2 architects, a landscape architect, and 2 other members who are either design professionals or just lay people. And the committee meets every month on the 3rd Monday in the afternoon. This is a rendering of a city project, but we're gonna, sorry, a city project, a recreation center. So largely what the committee carries out is review of new structures and renovated structures that city departments are carrying forward, but we're going to focus this discussion today, or these few slides, on things that are more likely to pertain to folks seeking grants through the Community Challenge Grant Program. Next slide. So the standard civic design review process, and that's the process that would pertain, as I just mentioned, to some of these larger architectural design and construction projects, is a 4-phase project. However, for smaller projects, we have several forms of review that are less, fewer steps, and in some cases do not require even a hearing before the Civic Design Review Committee. So we have a review called a small project review. We have something called an administrative review, and then plaques. And what we're showing in the images on the left are commemorative plaques, and those have their own separate process. I should have pointed out that on one of the prior slides, we have guidelines that are on our website. They are linked on the first page of the presentation, and they outline all of this information and lots more that I'm going to speak to today. So the best way, kind of picking up on some of what Nick was just saying, the best way to figure out if a project you're proposing falls into one of these buckets, whether it's small project review or administrative review, or if it's a plaque, it kind of is a plaque, it is really to reach out to the Civic Design Review staff, and the person to contact would be our Commission Secretary, Manraj Dhaliwal, and his contact information is provided here. Once the determination has been made in conversation with you, and with perhaps some information provided by the prospective applicant or proposer, we have a form called a request for review form, and there's, depending on the form of review that it is, or the form of process you're going through, specific materials that are required to be submitted for review. In some cases, as I mentioned, there may be a presentation at one of the Civic Design Review Committee's monthly meetings, and if that's the case, we have a deadline a couple of Fridays before that specific meeting for the materials to be submitted. Next slide. So as I said, we have, for larger projects, a 4-phase review process, and I don't think that's really likely to be pertinent here, so I won't step through all of those. But for smaller projects, what we call the small project review, it may entail combining one or more of the phases together. So rather than having a 4-phase review, it may be a 2-phase review or something along those lines. And that's usually for minor renovations and entrance and pathway improvements and that sort of thing. Administrative review doesn't require a hearing by the committee itself. It's an internal process for small projects, and those don't have to go to a committee. And then plaques, commemorative plaques, have their own process. And right here, this image on the right is an excerpt from a submittal by a community group. This was the group that was sponsoring the San Francisco Little Italy Honor Walk, which is a plaque project involving a series of plaques throughout largely North Beach and some adjacent neighborhoods within the city. And so a plaque series has a review process of its own, and a single plaque has a different process. So if you have questions about plaques, or your project is a plaque, it's good to reach out and just go through those details with us. Next slide. Here's another example of a community-driven project that came to the Civic Design Review Committee for approval. This was an archway, the Detroit Steps project archway. And as you can see, there was an existing staircase. The community wanted to create an archway over it. And so that is under the language of the city charter that I mentioned at the outset, viewed as a structure, and so that is why civic design review was required. And this is some of the submittal material that illustrates, what is the proposal, what are the materials, how is it fitting together, and so on. And so the architects on our committee can review that and ask any questions they may have. Next slide. And finally, what doesn't have to come to the Civic Design Review Committee? Again, this is outlined in our guidelines. There are certain types of projects that are exempt. So temporary projects, temporary structures placed on public property for 2 years or less are exempt from Civic Design Review. My colleagues are going to speak in a moment about temporary artworks, and those are reviewed by the Visual Arts Committee of the Arts Commission. And as I said, that will be the subject, I think, of the next set of slides. Infrastructure and utility upgrades, irrigation upgrades, fencing repairs, a variety of types of things that, while they may or may not be structures, or one might consider whether they could be considered structures, they don't require civic design review. Similarly, interior improvements don't come into the civic design review realm because they are not seen from the outside, from the public realm. In-kind repairs and replacements that are essentially replacing like with like do also not require civic design review. And of course, emergency work that needs to happen also does not implicate civic design review. So that is the conclusion of our presentation. And these, as I mentioned, all of this information is noted in our guidelines, which are online. And maybe, Manraj, can we go back to this first page, just show where that link is in these slides, so I can point that out to folks. Thank you. Yeah, right. There we are. One more back. There we are. So the second paragraph here, where it says the Arts Commission carries out this responsibility through its Civic Design Review Committee following its Civic Design Review guidelines. There's the link that takes you to our website where the guidelines can be found. Thanks very much.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. So that was Civic Design Review. Now we'll hear about a common request for CCG, which has to do with public art.
Everyone see my screen?
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
And just time check, we're going to finish with the Arts Commission by 3:10.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Paris Coates. I'm the Program Associate for Public Art, and I'm going to walk you through a general overview of approvals for murals, tiled stairways, sculpture, and light projections. So just a general overview, we're charged with the preservation and care of artwork in the Civic Art Collection, and we approve temporary or permanent installation of any work of art on city property or any artwork funded in whole or part by city funds, in this case, the Community Challenge Grant. Brief overview of Visual Arts Committee. It consists of at least 5 arts commissioners. They meet monthly on the 3rd Wednesdays at 2 p.m. in City Hall. Materials for the meeting to be placed on the agenda are due 10 days prior to the meeting. And there is no fee associated with having your project reviewed at the Arts Committee. So the approval process for murals and tiled stairways is as such. So first we will need your grant notification from the Community Challenge grants. And then we will ask you to submit a mural application packet, which I'll review on the next slide. Maybe I'll go there now. These are the materials we require in the mural approval packet. Same with tiled stairways. So first you'll need a signed letter from the property owner, city department. You'll need a completed mural design information form. You'll need the artist's resume, images of the mural design, including dimensions, an image of the proposed site, 3 letters of community support, and a signed waiver of proprietary rights for artworks. And depending on which is applicable to you, you complete one of these 2 forms. And this form is a legal document where the artist waives their right so that if the city agency or private property owner wants to remove the work for any reason as mentioned by your colleagues, MTA, street repairs, building repairs, you'll be able to do so without legal repercussions. And this is a standard form for public art. And then as far as approval timeline, you should allow at least 90 days from submitting your starting your application to the implementation of the mural to ensure that you have enough time. And a couple of things to note: we require photographic documentation of completed projects. Us approving your mural does not constitute acceptance into the Civic Art Collection, and we are not responsible for maintenance or preservation of artworks approved by our committee. And then moving on to temporary art, so that's sculpture, any 2D artwork such as paintings and light projections. We just have a general overview of criteria for that type of artwork. So the artwork should be appropriate for a diverse audience, have a compelling reason to be cited on city property, should be judged to enhance the public's experience of the site, should be an opportunity to expose the public to diverse artists and artistic styles, should not contradict the city's values, and it should be appropriate in scale, media, and context with its intended display. The artwork should also be judged to withstand display in an outdoor environment. And the artwork must not present a safety hazard, and it must comply with all applicable building codes and disability access requirements. So the process for temporary public art starts the same as the mural approval process. We'll need to see your grant notification. Then you'll need to determine the installation site property owner. So depending where you're installing the sculpture, whether it's on the sidewalk, in a park, on private property, you'll need to determine that. And at the end of this slide, I have all these websites linked, but there's a helpful website from the planning department. That's a property information map that allows you to determine property owners. So once you have done that, well, just a little bit more about property actually. So depending on whether it's city or public property, if you are installing artwork on city property, you'll need permission from the agencies and departments that have just jurisdiction over that property, as well as us. And just note that those agencies cannot provide additional financial support for your projects. This is a list of materials needed for the temporary public art approval. So it consists of this temporary public art proposal form. We need a letter of approval from the property owner, whether that's a city agency or a private property owner. We need 3 letters of community support, a brief narrative description of the project, which means the intent and how it relates to the site. We'll need a scale drawing or model of the proposed project, so basically just a representation of what it looks like. We need an image of the site it's intending to go in. We ask for a rendering of the artwork in the proposed site, so the mock-up of what it will look like as installed. We need a list of materials and description of assembly of materials. We ask for a timeline, including dates of installation and deinstallation. We ask for your maintenance plan, resumes of the artists, as well as that waiver of proprietary rights, also known as Capivara waiver. And in terms of approval schedule, we ask for this process to allot a little more time than the murals. So we recommend starting this process 2.5 months in advance of the Visual Arts Committee meeting, which meets on the 3rd Wednesday of every month. And just a few things to note for temporary art. You will be asked to come in person and present your item at the Visual Arts Committee, whereas for murals, you will not. And any installations lasting less than 7 days can be approved by the Director of Cultural Affairs and do not need to be placed on an agenda. And installations proposed for the airport do not go through us. They need to be routed through SFO's program. So I know we have the Q&A feature here, but here's my email, as well as links to the mural design approval guidelines and information on how to submit that packet, as well as temporary public art, as well as the property information map I mentioned, and a link to the Visual Arts Committee meeting page.
Before I move on, thank you, Paris. Before I move on to Coco, I wanted to bring up a few things because this information is useful just in general, even if you're not applying for a CCG grant. But number one, CCG what is not eligible is sculptures, because that would fall under a tier 3 Love Our Neighborhoods permit, which Logan will get into in a minute from Public Works. So sculptures are not eligible. Just want to clarify that. Number 2, Paris, you didn't touch on this. So you talked about preparation for the VAC committee review, but it's not formally, you can't formally move forward on your project until it's also approved by the full commission, correct?
Yes, I didn't go into every detail, but
Which
yes.
is,
So you will need, once you your project goes before VAC, Visual Arts Committee, and is approved, then it will go to full Arts Commission, which meets on the first Monday of every month, usually depending on the holiday schedule. Once it is fully approved from the Arts Commission, then you'll be provided with a resolution number, and from there you may proceed.
so you'll need to budget in that time between VAC approval and full commission approval, just when you're thinking about your timelines. And then we do have a question in the chat. So for murals, we don't apply for permits until after we've been awarded a CCG grant, correct? And I'll take that. So number one, you only have to go to VAC if you have public funds, or it's on public property. So if you're planning to do a mural on private property, you wouldn't need to go to VAC if you don't get a CCG grant. If it is going to be on public property, you would have to go to VAC anyways, whether you get the grant or not. And so I think it's kind of up to Paris about whether you should go before VAC if you don't have the funding that you need, or if you don't have public funding that you need.
Yeah, so we only review murals that are either funded with city money or on city property. So if neither of those apply, then you don't need to go through our process.
Okay, great. So let's move on to Coco.
Hello, this is Coco speaking. I'm just there we go. All right. I'm trying to share the slides, but I don't
See it?
okay. Okay, you see it? Great. Thank you. Okay, this is Coco speaking. I'm program officer with the Arts Commission working with the cultural centers in our program, and I'm here to briefly present on what is specifically needed for a community challenge grants proposal for projects at the city-owned cultural centers. Okay, the community-based cultural centers provide accessible arts opportunities for all San Franciscans. The cultural centers are comprised of 4 city-owned facilities and 3 virtual cultural centers that are operated by nonprofit art organizations and provide cultural and arts programs. The center facilities are available for rent and offer free or low-cost performances, gallery exhibits, and classes. On the slide are the 4 city-owned physical brick-and-mortar cultural centers. We have the African American Art and Culture Complex in the historic Jazz District of San Francisco, the Bayview Opera House Ruth Williams Memorial Theater, also known as the Ruth Williams Opera House, in the African American Arts and Cultural District. We have Mission Cultural Center for Latino Arts in the Caybe de Cuantro Latino Cultural District. And we have Soma Arts, which is south of Market and in the Leather and LGBTQ Cultural District. Included in SFAC's Cultural Center program, but not listed on this slide, are the centers that do not manage city-owned buildings, and they are American Indian Cultural Center, San Francisco, Asian Pacific Islander Cultural Center, and Queer Cultural Center. Okay. So for the CCG, cultural center process. So for cultural centers, cultural center nonprofit tenants, or neighborhood nonprofits applying for a community challenge grant, projects can range from landscaping, a mural, or an event or festival. For cultural centers, if you are a physical city-owned brick and mortar cultural center, then you would need to contact the San Francisco Arts Commission directly with a project summary, proposed budget, and work plan. Once all documentation has been reviewed and hopefully approved, you will receive a copy of the property letter from SFAC to submit with your Community Challenge Grant proposal. For cultural center nonprofit tenants and any other nonprofits, you would need to receive written approval from the cultural center to host your project at their center. If you receive approval from the center, you will then need to contact the Arts Commission with the project summary, proposed budget, and work plan. Please be sure to include the written approval from the cultural center in your email to the Arts Commission. Once all documentation has been reviewed and hopefully approved, you will receive a copy of the property owner letter from SFAC to submit with your proposal. For nonprofit cultural center tenants and nonprofits and organizations, it's recommended that you reach out to the cultural centers no later than Friday, August 29th. Since the CCG proposals are due Friday, August 29th, since CCG proposals are due Thursday, October 9th by 2 p.m. for cultural centers, nonprofit cultural center tenants, and other nonprofits. To be able to receive a copy of the property owner letter from SFAC, please submit your request to us by no later than Friday, September 12th. And here is a template of the property owner letter that will need to be submitted with your application, as well as contact information for Deputy Director of Programs, Evan Glenn, who is the SFC city contact for the property owner letter. Highlighted in yellow are the areas that will be filled out and sent back to you in a letter from SFAC, including the designated cultural center that you will need to include in your Community Challenge Grants proposal. And okay, thank you. I hope this information was helpful, and I wish you all luck with your proposal.
Thanks, Coco. So
Thank
the
you.
city-owned cultural centers are gems in our neighborhoods. They were fought for by the community, and so we wanted to make sure that they were included as potential sites for CCG, and that they themselves may also apply. I don't see any questions, so I think we can move along to San Francisco Public Works.
Thank you.
I'll get us kicked off here briefly. This is Logan Hain with Public Works, and today we've got a few different things to run through with everybody here. And one of the things I want to make sure that we start with is going to be Susan Naubery from our Bureau of Urban Forestry. She's going to lead through a couple of the possibilities on her end. Susan, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Logan. Yeah, so my name is Susan. I'm with the Bureau of Urban Forestry at the City and County of San Francisco, and I'm here with Public Works. And we see a lot of tree planting and landscaping and beautification with these community challenge grants. So first we want to talk about the tree planting permit. They're totally free. We just want you to submit like a simple drawing. We have all our guidelines on our website. It includes sewer, water, gas, street light, street signs. We want to know like what your sidewalk widths are and how large are the basins you're proposing. And we have a guideline that shows you how to lay out the basins in this website too. So we'd want you to submit your application and drawing either online. There's an online link here where you can just fill out the form or just email it to Urban Forestry Permits. And that's also on our website. We usually just respond that we've received it and then we copy the inspector so that you can arrange a meeting with the inspector, ask them questions. If it's really simple, like one location, they may not need to meet you. They may just be able to tell you where to plant the tree. The inspector will approve the species. And a lot of people have their heart set on a specific tree species. Every tree is different. In the city of San Francisco, there are hundreds of microclimates. So like a magnolia may not be suitable, for example, in the Richmond, but it may be suitable in like Forest Hill. So we want to work with you on the species. But we also want to make sure that the tree will thrive, because even though this is a community challenge grant specific to the neighbors around the location, all the trees are an asset to the entirety of the city and county of San Francisco and all of the residents. So next slide. So this is just an example of why we want to meet with you and look at your very simple site plan, which you'll see an example of in the Sidewalk landscaping section. This is a tree that someone just planted because they wanted a little cherry tree. It's less than 20 feet from the stop sign, and I don't know if you can tell, it's deciduous, but the canopy is just constantly being topped to create visibility for that stop sign. So this is what we're trying to prevent here. So we have these rules. We don't want the tree within 3 feet of waters and parking meters. We definitely want to stay clear of fire escapes, and so you just kind of want to lay all these out first and then pick your tree locations. And next slide. So we have a recommended street tree list, and that's also on our website at SF Public Works Plant Street Tree. But we will also work with you on finalizing that tree. So just because it's on this list doesn't mean just pick whatever you want, because we want to make sure you're not planting a tree that's too tall for the high voltage lines or too wide for the location, like the sidewalk, or too close to a street light. We'll allow small trees next to street lights, but we may not allow a large stature tree next to a street light, depending on how close it is and the canopy width. So next slide. Okay, and on our website, we don't have to play this video, but we have a video on how to plant trees, specifically with volunteers. So I do recommend playing this video. It's really great. It goes into a lot of detail of how to deal with the root ball of the tree for successful planting, how to implement safety measures for volunteers planting the trees, and how to arrange the tree based on where you are in traffic or near the curb. Make sure you don't have like a limb that's near the sidewalk and orient it along the curb, and also just how to like stake the tree. So it's a great video. I strongly recommend it. Again, it's on our website at sfpublicworks.org/plant a street tree. Next slide. So what we also see is people want to beautify their neighborhood by adding benches and things. So what we don't want to see is we don't want to see containers around trees, because what happens is the soil that's built up around the tree base, and that creates opportunities for decay fungi to infect the tree. So we don't want to see that. It also reduces the amount of oxygen that's getting to those surface roots. So and I know I love benches too, but like you can't really put them around a tree because it's really detrimental for the tree health and sometimes safety and stability of the tree roots. Yeah, so next slide. And then next is our sidewalk landscaping permit. This one does have a fee, but if you do a sidewalk landscaping permit as a group, so you say you have 5 houses on a block, the permit fee is reduced. So one sidewalk landscaping fee is $362, but each applicant only has to pay $269 if you do it as a group, and we'll meet you and walk with you on the site. And you should have simple drawings. Some people want to include trees with sidewalk landscaping, so that's why we put that in there. And we'll either, if you apply online, you just pay the invoice online. If you email us the PDF, we will then email you an invoice. So next slide. So this is just our web page, but if you go to it, there's each one of these blue boxes is like how to submit the tree planting application. There's a how-to guide, how to draw a site plan, and the planting lists and species palettes. So there's a lot of information here, but we're here to answer your questions and meet you guys on site and show you like how this applies in reality. So next slide. So this is an example of what some residents submitted to us. It's really simple. You don't have to go crazy or hire an architect. I think that for them, like 1 square was 1 foot. Like most squares in the city are 3 feet. Sometimes they're 3.5 feet. Yeah, so in here they say it's a 3-foot square is 4 little graphing squares. So they put their water meter here on the left. They drew out their tree locations. They did like the courtesy strip we require from the curb, because that's where you want to ensure people can park and get out of their cars. And so this is their sidewalk landscaping plan. It's really just simple drawing. And in this case, they don't have the sidewalk width, but because they have like the 3-foot square of concrete, we can kind of guess what that is. And so it's just very simple, and this is all we're really asking in terms of site plans. So next slide. These people went above and beyond. So they actually drew out in chalk, in addition to submitting that site plan, where they wanted those sidewalk landscaping plots. And they just read the guidelines in that sidewalk landscape web page that said you have to have a 2-foot courtesy strip. So if you see where the orange arrow is there, It's 18 inches plus the 6-inch curb. So that's what the guideline says. You have to set them back. And then they also spaced the landscaping about 4 to 6 feet apart so that people could get out in between. And then they have a really wide sidewalk, so they were able to create pretty large planting strips. And they also expanded tree basins. So if you do that, you can also just expand tree basins without a permit if the tree basin is large enough to encompass the majority of the tree roots. If it's like significantly larger than the existing tree, like that little tree in the back, you know, you will need to submit a SFAC landscaping permit. But if you're just helping the tree by expanding the growing area, we may waive the requirement for a SFAC landscaping permit altogether. Yeah, so next slide, if any. Yeah, and then just lastly, this is just this is also on our website, but it's just a flyer on the SFAC landscaping page altogether, and you know, it has like a tree basin layout, sidewalk landscaping layout on the lower right hand corner. It has the microclimates in the middle, like the fog belt, the transition belt, the sun belt, and it just talks about what measurements you want to include. And again, this is just on the sidewalk landscaping web page. And so if you just contact us, we can point you to any of these links, and you can contact us at urbanforestry@sfdpw.org, or this our phone number right here on that flyer. It's kind of small, right there, and then at urban forestry permits@sfdpw.org, or just Google contact urban forestry city of San Francisco and you'll find us. So that concludes tree planting and SFAC landscaping.
There's two questions. So urban forestry, or, you know, the tree planting permit, is that needed just for tree plantings on public land?
Correct. So tree planting, we don't need tree planting permits for private property. We have the jurisdiction over the public right-of-way alone. We do require, and most community challenge grants don't include this, but if somebody wanted to remove, for example, a significant tree on private property that's within 10 feet of the property line, we would require a removal permit for that. But in this case, we're just talking about tree planting, and we don't require a permit for planting on private property.
And then one more question. Is there a different process for planting in an existing empty tree basin?
If it is an existing empty basin and you would like to plant a tree, we require the tree planting permit still.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
What's up next?
Fabulous. All right. Well, thank you, Susan.
Yes.
I'm going to then transition us to talking about banner permits. And one of the first caveats I'll lead with to everybody in this group is I am not the expert on banner permits, but I was able to speak with the person who is and consolidate that information. They unfortunately weren't available today. So the first thing I'm going to do is direct you to our website. There's a lot of information there to really dive into, and a lot of good info there describing what we look for in an application and what constitutes a good application. But really briefly, what qualifies for a banner permit? The banner permit ultimately is for the purpose of providing notice to residents and visitors of San Francisco about city-sponsored, city-funded, city-wide special events and locations of the city's diverse neighborhoods. And the legal text for that is cited there in Article 5.7 section of the Public Works Code. The other piece of this is the website does go into more detail on what each of these is and what each of these means. As for who may apply for this permit, it's ultimately any nonprofit, cultural, promotional, or civic organization within San Francisco. The application itself is going to ask for some pretty standard information, so contact information. It's also going to want to be very specific about the streets and the number of poles to be used. Also making sure you identify who those pole owners are. Is it an MTA pole? Is it a PUC pole, etc.? We'll need to know the name and the dates of the event. A letter of attendance is often required. What this is essentially a letter that states that historically you've had X amount of people attending and you anticipate the same, or that you're planning on capping or limiting attendance at X type of event, so that we have that awareness around that and can document that for the idea of promoting it. We'll need to know the dates of the installation and the removal, so that being proposed and letting us know that. We need to know the size of the banner you intend to have installed, as well as the design. We need to know the hardware used to install it, the material of the banner, and that includes that method of attachment. Traditionally, this is a stainless steel clamp with a neoprene underlay. So just that's what most people and most installation companies will use. We do want to see a fully dimensioned plan with all of that information there. They said streets, pole locations, the detailing, and also a certificate of insurance. Now, the certificate of insurance needs to reach a general liability level of 2 million, and it also needs to name the city and county of San Francisco as an additionally insured party. So all of that compiled into one application. Looks like a lot. A lot of it is actually pretty straightforward ultimately. Um, In addition, so some of the guidelines that I want to share with you today about banners and their design and hanging. So vertical banner designs is what we're talking, not horizontal. These are meant to be on poles, and most of them wind up on our street poles. We're familiar with them. We've seen them around the city, and they cannot exceed 36 inches in width by 72 inches in length. That is the maximum size. They may advertise the event, but may not advertise any business or product. This isn't for necessarily sales or promotion, and want to be very clear about that line. They need to observe clearances around riser and guy wires related to these poles. MTA poles often will have a riser that feeds power, guy wires that are there to support other things. The bottom bracket of the banner has to be 14 feet above a roadway and 12 feet minimum above a sidewalk. So kind of observing some of these pieces in terms of the design and the hanging, and whatever company you go with ultimately to create these banners and fabricate them and then install them, ultimately should be able to help you move through all of these requirements and guidelines. So again, I know I'm throwing a lot of info there, but your partner in that will definitely be your installer. And our website has a few names on it, I believe, of just, it's a non-inclusive, non-recommended list of installers who've done this across the city. And I would also say they would be an excellent resource for you when you're exploring this. Back to logos themselves, they may not be 15% or more than 15%. They can only be 15% or less of the overall banner, and they must be placed in the bottom 15% of the banner. So that bottom strip of it is really where you're going to be able to place just a very like subtle nod to your group, and as opposed to like advertising the event above. Logos cannot include advertisements or slogans. So also being aware of that, logo is what we look at as a visual, not as necessarily that slogan element or that sales element. So, and then also upon the conclusion of the event or promotion, knowing that the banners and the attachments, those clamps and sleeves, must be removed within 5 business days. So if your banners are placed up specifically to mark the symphony season, for example, when the symphony season ends, 5 days later, all of those banners have to come down. That's a very visible example we've all seen out there, I think. So those are some of the guidelines that do exist for these. And the last thing I'd like to show you is a couple of quick diagrams. After like going through this, it's like these are some very specific resources for where you can find more detailed guidelines. But these diagrams also kind of exist to illustrate some of the things I've talked about. So in this case, like this is the space for a logo, this is the percentage, your maximum width and height, noting a 2-foot minimum clearance towards a guy wire or other elements such as that, and to that top bracket. And then coming down here, noting your clearance above the street versus the sidewalk from the bottom bracket of the banner. And again, all this can be found on the website. So I highly encourage anybody who might be interested in that to go there, check out those resources, do a deep dive. And then of course, feel free to reach out to the contact information you'll find there, so that we can then start answering questions. We're happy to engage early on that one, is what this individual has told me. And with that, I'd actually like to turn to our next presenter, which is going to be Jimmer Cassiel.
All righty. Thank you, Logan. And hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you, Robin, for the last, what is it, 2 years now that you've been going through all this and putting together this these grants, the community challenge grants. There's a few things here. I don't know. I don't have a lot of time. I'm Jimmer Cassio with Community Programs and Public Works, and our umbrella program is called Love Our City. And please note, it's our city. We went through a lot of steps to find out that it's not your city, not my city, but it's our city. So that's why we have that in the title of our program. Just as a reminder, we have volunteer programs that we love everybody to participate in. We have the Adopt a Street program. And it's an online application. It can be an individual, but we also do large group cleanups, litter pickups, and cleanups with schools, businesses, neighborhood organizations under the Adopt a Street program. We have Graffiti Watch, which is basically the same thing, but you're abating graffiti on public property. We have about 7 standard colors that we use on public furniture, and we provide you with the paint, and it's a simple training video online that you take. You fill out the application, and again, you can do as an individual at your leisure whenever you want, once a week, once a month. And we ask that people just take care of the area around where they live, work, or go to school. And then we also have larger graffiti wipeout events. There was one in the Tenderloin just recently. Neighborhood Beautification Day is our longest running volunteer program at Public Works, formerly known as Community Clean Team. We revamped it as Neighborhood Beautification Day. This event takes place once a month over 11 months. Each of the 11 months, it's in a different district. And what we do is we get a bunch of volunteers out to gather at the kickoff location. There's some speeches and coffee, and then all the volunteers are assigned to a specific project, and they go out, they do their work, and then they come back. We serve lunch, and again, it's January through November, once a month, and in a different supervisorial district each month. And then the big one is our Streets Parks program. A lot of people are not going to be asking for community challenge grants to do Adopt a Street Graffiti Watch or Neighborhood Beautification Day. Street Parks is the one that they're going to be wanting to do a community challenge grant. So I want to give you a little information about our Street Parks program. It has been elevated recently to one of our priority programs. It's our signature program because it involves community members basically adopting a space, the city right of way, or I'm sorry, public right of way, could be non-public right of way, could be a parcel. So the street parks are a wide variety of different spaces, public right of way and non-public right of way. What you would do if you decide and you and your neighbors decide you want to take this lot of land just down the street that's basically used as a dumping ground for illegal dumping, you may want to take it over and adopt it, take it, make it yours. So you're going to select a location, and then you'll contact us at Community Programs to discuss the possibilities. We'll review and see who owns the property. It has to be a city-owned property. That you'll fill out the application. You're going to select a steward. So you're going to have some lead folks on this thing, on this project, that are going to basically be the stewards of it, and they're going to organize some cleanup events. We usually try to have folks do within 6 to 12 months to work in the area, to do maybe 3 or more actual cleanup events. Get volunteers to come out. We'll come out with the tools, whatever tools you need, so that the volunteers can work on this area that's going to be soon become a street park. All this information can be found on our website at sfpublicworks.org. You go up to when you're on the main page, go to Get Involved up at the top, and then you'll type in, or you'll hit either Neighborhood Improvement or Volunteer. Next slide. There we go. Okay, community programs, love our street parks. Now, this is a little more detail about the street parks. Again, if you're going to be asking for a community challenge grant, chances are you've already created a street park, and now you want to put some more into it, make it more beautiful. Maybe you want to put some sidewalk in it or something. And that's where a mural, that's where you'll end up doing the community or trying to get funding, raise funding either through grants or fundraising. What is a street park? The Street Parks program is a partnership involving Public Works and the residents of San Francisco. Common goal of creating community managed spaces on city-owned land. The Street Parks program transforms Public Works owned parcels into green open spaces, gardens, neighborhood gathering spaces, and more. Since the program's inception in 2004, more than 100 street parks have been developed and more are in process. Each street park is unique because it is created by to meet the needs of the community that develops it. Street parks function as ornamental gardens, places of recreation, community meeting spaces, wildlife habitat, and other open space uses. The program stakeholders are most likely or always the city department is the property owner, the community members, the steward or the project lead on the street park, and then many times you'll need a nonprofit organization to be the fiscal sponsor. If you get a grant, you're going to need a fiscal sponsor to basically manage the finances. The street park program benefits. Beautifies neighborhoods and improves quality of life, provides an opportunity for community groups to envision and create a customized park that addresses their specific neighborhood needs, increases biodiversity and enhances habitat, activates underutilized spaces and creates opportunities for recreation, decreases incidences of blight and unwanted behavior such as the illegal dumping, increases safety in neighborhoods, and enhances value of adjacent properties. Next slide. And these are some of the photos of some of our street parks that I just grabbed. In here, you got the Tompkins Stairs, which has that tile mosaic on it. And eventually Logan will be going over our new Love Our Neighborhood permit process. And this would fall into a tier 2. This was a street park taking care of both sides of the stairs. And now they recently added in the tile mosaic. The second photo to the right of that is the Glen Park Greenway, where they're doing lots of planting. You can see the volunteers in the background over there. On 16th Avenue, the next photo, we have a tiled, the 16th Avenue tiled steps. And then next to that is the Detroit steps. And I think that was the one with the archway that they want to put in there, or they're trying to put in there. Down on the bottom left, one of our newest street park locations, the Bayview Letters. And then we have the Quesada Garden next to that. Okay, so next page, Logan, please. Okay, community engagement, Love Our Neighborhood. Love Our Neighborhood permit is something Logan worked tirelessly on to make this a way for the community to be able to spearhead these projects and not have it take 10 years to do so and thousands of dollars. So they have created the Love Our Neighborhood permit process, which is a less expensive and much faster way of doing things. And Logan will go through all that with you in a few moments. The community-driven projects need community involvement. This is where these street parks, you have a street park, you've created it, now you want to do more to it. So you may want to add a mural or some more plants or maybe some DG. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to need to start building the support from the locals. You're going to want to have information out to them, whatever you're planning on doing. If you're getting the CCG grant, you want everybody that is in the local area to know about it. You don't want to be working on putting up a mural and then the day the mural is supposed to start getting up on the wall, find out that the woman across the street says she's never heard of this and doesn't like it. So you want to make sure that everybody's on board with what is going on in their neighborhood. It is everybody's neighborhood, and you don't want people to have to walk out their door and look at something that they don't want to be looking at. You're going to organize the community cleanup and related events. This is if it's a street park, you're going to organize these cleanups. We need to know that you're actually committed and involved in taking on a street park, creating a street park. Some of these stewards that we have been here for well over like about 20 years now, since 2004. Organizing community cleanups and related events, and then the fundraising. You're going to do the fundraising, you're going to raise funds. This is when you have the 501c3 nonprofit as your fiscal sponsor. These community-driven projects benefit from expertise. And basically, the more you know up front, the better your permit application is going to be. If it's a mural, it's going to have to go through the Arts Commission first. You'll be gathering a bunch of information for that Arts Commission, and that has a lot of what we will end up needing. But if it's not a mural and it's not going to go through the Arts Commission, we do want to work with you and make sure that you have everything that you will need in order to submit the application. Part of the process is to reduce the time frame, and it really helps to have the real good information, drawings, designs, everything up front. And Logan will be going over the things that will be needed in the Love Our Neighborhood permits. And then go to the next one. And this is Logan.
Oh, so pretty. Everyone's been waiting for this permit. Thank you for your kind words, Jimmer. Before we go to Logan, there was a question that came in the Q&A that Logan and I can't, it came in right after he presented on banners. And so if you submitted this, please resubmit and clarify. It says to clarify, a location is a neighborhood, correct? Outside of a promotion or event. I think we need a little bit more details because yeah, we're just a little bit not clear on what that question is. So resubmit. And like I said, Love Our Neighborhoods, Logan and we work together a lot. A lot of people have been waiting for this to come online. It's now public. And so take it away. Everyone's been waiting to hear about it.
All right. Yes, really quickly back to thank you for clarifying the question about banners and what you were referring to, and I'll happily, if I don't have the answer for you now, I'll chase it down. But to turn to Love Our Neighborhoods, it's taken a long time to obviously kind of pull into being, and part of that is we really wanted to try as hard as we could to get this right. And so we're excited to finally have officially launched it and be ready to share that with everybody here today. And so few of the things I want to talk about ultimately are going to be, kind of the community development piece, which we've already touched on. And thank you, Jimmer, because it's an amazing group with a lot of amazing resources. The program outline and kind of what it does and doesn't encompass, and some of the details behind that. This is a very ambitious program. It's meant to cover a lot of different types of amenities in the right of way. We'll give a couple of brief examples and kind of help, my goal is to allow you to kind of see sort of like how we approach these and how we begin to design these with you and how we begin to parse them out. And then, of course, also leaving some time at the room for questions that I'm sure will pop up as we go through. And I'll do my best to keep an eye on the Q&A as we go, so that if I'm talking about something and opining and you have a question in that moment, I'll be able to see it. So first off.
And Logan, you can go pretty much until 4 o'clock.
Okay, good to know. So the first thing I want to talk about quickly is that property owner letter. You saw this earlier, and I want to kind of ask, it's give us a lead time of 2 weeks when you come to us with that. Provide any information you have sooner if you're able to. And the things you're going to look at are largely inside of this letter. We need the location. We need to know where it is, an address or GPS coordinates, so that we can look at it and we can check it, make sure we really are the owner. And if we're not, make sure that we can help you find out who the owner is. That is something that we do. We hold the city maps, so we can help figure that out. Also, letting us know what the project elements are and the basic site plan, because we know this is still the conceptual phase when you're applying for the grant at this point. But what is planned? Where is it going? Do you have a really basic mock-up of where you want things placed in space? And ultimately, we want to know who's behind this project. Is what kind of community group is approaching us and asking for this, and what is the plan for them taking on the long-term care of anything associated with these projects, be that the plants, be that the art, and or anything that is any amenity that is ultimately going to be placed in that public right of way. Another thing I want to talk about in this permitting program that's different than anything we've kind of seen before is that this has a dedicated analyst. And this person is operating as kind of that communication center. And just to give you a visual of that, these are all the dots it's connecting. That analyst is a connection to 311. That analyst is a connection back to the applicant, back to all of the city agencies, and even within our own agency to all of our different groups inside, our different engineering types, our permitting teams, our disability access coordinator. All of this ties back to this one individual to kind of be that central communications hub and really help pull that through. This person also is going to be educated and empowered to review the tier 1 projects. That's not as applicable to this group because a tier 1, and we'll talk about that more later, and what it is. They do what's called a completeness check of the applications for tier 2 and 3 applications. What this means is this person looks at it and says, hey, I've noticed you didn't include details about the grading inside of your site plan. We may need that, and you should and they will get in touch with you directly so that you don't have to go 3 steps down the road and then come back 3 steps. We're trying to get rid of as much of that back and forth as we possibly can. They're going to be mapping the review process for you. So what this means, and tracking its process as well. So letting you know up front in the beginning, hey, you've submitted X type of project. Here's the steps that we're going to send it through. And ultimately, they're going to also be the ones who can tell you, hey, we've achieved X milestone. We've gotten to this point. It made it through X type of review, and then get back to you. And if you have a question about where it's at, and maybe you haven't heard from somebody for a while, they also can help you try to chase that down and check that out. And noticing, I want to really quickly again emphasize, like, this is also the connection to the other city agencies, as much as we're able to help in that. So if you come to us with, I'm trying to think of a particularly good example, but something that would, I'll say a plaque that requires Arts Commission review. We work closely with the Arts Commission and we stay in touch with them. And so if you are turning to us and asking a question, like, we might be able to refer you directly. And we'll be also like able to connect on if you're not sure where to begin over there when you approach us. We're happy to help make that happen so that you can get moving on the right track. And also, as other agencies are updating their requirements, we're kind of keeping track of what those are so that we can help you make as informed decisions and planning processes as possible. So, and right there, guiding you to other agencies and resources. So the next thing I really want to start diving into is the program itself and the elements it covers and who can apply for it. And tier 1, the applicant is a private property owner, and that's why this isn't quite as applicable here to this group. If the business owns the property, yes. So businesses in general are not private property owners. A lot of our businesses in this city are commercial renters. If they own it, the answer is yes. Otherwise, they have to get the property owner to make them an authorized agent. The reason I bring this up here is because that may be required of other projects depending on what it is and where it is, that idea of the authorized agent. So tier 2 and 3, and largely tier 2, established organizations can apply. And what this means is a community-based organization, such as a neighborhood groups. Detroit Arch keeps coming up. They also did a mural on the upper steps. So Detroit Stairs Project being associated with Sunnydale Neighborhood Association. Nonprofit organizations. It's a really broad definition. Nonprofit. Community benefit districts are also eligible to apply for this permit. So if you maybe have a project idea and you need to work with somebody for the longer term care of it, a community benefit district is a great one to approach potentially if they're available. And merchants associations are also able to apply for this permit. So that's something where, like, again, project idea that you maybe want to implement but don't have quite all the resources you need. Maybe your local merchants association is able and willing to step up and help out with this. So again, individual businesses not being able to apply for 2 or 3 unless they qualify under one of those above 4. And then established, what this means is provable existence, a minimum of 2 years. It's a really broad definition of provable existence, but you must have existed for 2 years in order to be able to apply for the Love Our Neighborhoods permit. So let's also dig into a little bit of like who's responsible for these, right? And similar to what MTA has stated and others, the applicant or the permittee is required to accept the maintenance and the liability for the project. Well, you know, the permit gives you permission to place it out there, but it is still ultimately you accepting that maintenance responsibility and the liability responsibility for it. And to that end as well, from where we are, you're expected to shoulder the cost of those materials, the construction, the installation, and the ongoing maintenance. Beautiful thing is this is why we're here today, because San Francisco has seen the need and stepped up with the Community Challenge Grant Program, which Robin is leading. So those are two big things I want to point out right at the beginning. Now, the Love Our Neighborhoods permit and program only applies to public works right of way. So the easiest way that I can speak to the right of way is it's by and large the sidewalk. We're all familiar with that, right? It's those pieces of land that are meant for everybody to access and traverse through. And jurisdiction can get sometimes a little subtle through the city, but the big one is not on roadways. Love Our Neighborhoods projects don't go in the roadway. As MTA stated, they regulate those, and like there's a lot of considerations around striping and traffic movement and safety. Not on rec or port property. So Love Our Neighborhoods permits do not apply to those properties, and not on parcels. And parcels are treated differently under the law than the right of way is. So if you have a location out there and you're not sure where it falls, reach out to us. We're happy to do a check for you really quick and really easy, and just be like, okay, give us an address or a cross street, or walk us through where it is, and we'll take a look and we'll see who owns it and where the boundaries are and what might be possible there with you. I'll now talk to the tiers themselves. Tier 1, really straightforward. It's planters, it's sidewalk benches, it's little libraries placed by private property owners into the right of way. Those all fall under Tier 1, which is a registry, and by and large, again, won't necessarily apply to this group. Now, the things that will be interesting to this group are the tier 2s in particular. This encompasses sidewalk, painted, and tiled murals, some string lighting projects, very specifically those string lighting projects which run parallel to a street and do not cross it. Minor landscaping projects. So if there's basic hillside cleanup you want to do, or maybe some minor plant swaps or things of that nature, maybe you want to use an existing water meter and fixture to place in a drip irrigation system that doesn't take up a large amount of room, then that's absolutely something that may fall under minor landscaping. Tiled staircases I want to speak to, and I'll give them their own due. If they follow a predetermined set of public works specifications, which we have posted to the website, there's a set of specs there for thin set tile mortar application, then they fall under tier 2 because it's been very defined, and that's available to you and your tile installer. And if there's anybody here in particular who's interested in tiled staircases, I'll gladly have a larger conversation about those. The thing that I will point out immediately with tiled staircases is that many of the staircases in this city are old. Many were WPA projects. So just be aware of that when we approach a staircase. It's not just putting tile onto the stairs. It's actually approaching the staircase with the idea of how do we upgrade the stair and make sure it is compliant with modern building standards and accessibility standards. So do be aware that that's a piece of that equation when you want to approach a tiled staircase. And then commemorative plaques as well fall under tier 2. And I'm going to take a second to turn towards the Q&A section because I see things popping up. Jorge has asked to define liability. Contractors carry insurance during the build up when they're done and finished, unless something else happens, and there might be negligence in design or construction. But if none of that happens, who's responsible if someone gets hurt on the site once done? This is part of what we have, and we'll talk more about this in the outline of the process piece. There's a maintenance and liability agreement, which every applicant is required to sign. And what that does is that places the liability upon the shoulders of the applicant or the permittee, because this is an addition to the standard right of way which the city has created. This is an addition to the city standard materials. So that liability becomes upon you as the applicant or the permittee to then hold. And there is a threshold For tier 2 projects that exceed $50,000 worth of what we call hard construction costs, then there's the election of the insurance as well, and the community group may be required to carry insurance. That's a rather large price tag, and that is only those hard materials. So that's one question. There's another question here. If we need to repair existing stairs, are those automatically tier 2? Repairs are not necessarily part of the Love Our Neighborhoods permit. The permit itself is about what you are applying to the stairs. So the repair work, because the structure is owned by the city, then the repair work comes to the city. Now, if it's a private staircase, that's an entirely different can of worms. There's another question here. We are looking for support to put a mural on our building, which is privately owned by the YMCA. Unclear as to what permits are necessary. Arts Commission, Love Your Neighborhood. I would like to kind of save that one up if I could. I want to get through more details about this for everybody before kind of really diving in deep. But briefly, a private mural, and that means private dollars, no public dollars, on private property does not require a public works permit. Now, I will not speak to the Arts Commission's process on that, and that's a question for maybe them to chime in with a little more information. But for us, if it's a private mural, meaning no public dollars are involved on a private building, and you have that building owner's permission, then it's not part of the right of way. It's not on a city structure. So do be aware of that. And turning to staircases really quickly, what I will also say is a lot of people focus very hard on tile, and I would also recommend there's some beautiful painted stairs out there right now. Upper Detroit Steps is working on building a mural on those stairs right now that is gorgeous. There's some vinyl stairs out there. If you look at Yerba Buena, that's not paint. Yerba Buena Center is actually a vinyl application, which has a amazing amount of benefits to it, actually. So we're also learning a lot of new ways in which to help beautify our communities through this program. In the case of that mural, public dollars would be involved. Definitely SFAC, Arts Commission, will need to be looking at that then. And please, at any point, Arts Commission, tell me if I'm wrong. And in terms of like, if there's a mural with public dollars, definitely SFAC. If the building is a private building and not a public building, then a public works permit for the right of way is not needed. Now, what you may need, or your artist may need, is for the installation, you may need to put scaffolding or something inside of the sidewalk or the right of way. You may need a temporary occupancy permit or something similar from us for that. And that would be one where, like, be in touch with us to let us know early so we can help you plan that and budget those things out. But so far as the Love Our Neighborhoods permit, private building, not Love Our Neighborhoods, but definitely if it's public dollars, SFAC approvals. Moving on, I want to show you what tier 3 encompasses, specifically so you know what not to do. And tier 3 is a new retaining wall or a staircase. It's sculptures. It's what we call pedestrian scale lighting, which are sometimes look at like those 3-foot bollards out there that run by solar, and sometimes they're a little higher, up to like say 12 feet roughly. And they're just meant to be at a pedestrian scale and light the sidewalk or an area of passage, not a street. String lights that hang across a street, specifically across a commercial corridor, are tier 3. Tiled staircases that deviate from the predetermined specs. Those specs we have posted for thin set tile and mortar application. If it's different than that, it becomes a tier 3 because that now requires a whole new level of review and structural check. And then fog catchers are also legislated into the tier 3 category. So the reason I bring this up is kind of so you know what not to do. Now, I know there's still an opening where a combination of tier 2s equals a tier 3. The cost of these permits, a tier 2 is $533 currently, and a tier 3 is double that. So if you kind of look at the math of that, then there's a point of economy of, you know, individual versus multiple permits. So be aware of that as well when you look at these things. There's another new post, and I will come back to community bulletin boards are not legislated into this program. There's a content issue with that and rotating content. There's a structure involved. We would need to have a deeper conversation about how that would be done, but as of this point, they're not legislated in. I'm going to kind of push forward because we only have like 5 minutes left. So apologies for really driving hard. Tier 3s, so you're aware, if you do combine those tier 2 elements, there's an expanded maintenance and liability agreement. There is a maintenance endowment. This is not money that is made available to you. This is money that you have to pay into the city as part of the permit requirement. This is a legislative requirement, and it is 20% of the estimated annual maintenance costs paid over the course of 10 years. So that's 20% of those costs annually every 10 years, or not every 10 years, excuse me, every year for 10 years. And that comes into the city, and we hold that, Public Works holds that specifically. It's set aside as part of and related to the permit. It's not spent by the city in any other way, shape, or form. And it also, just do know, it does not return to you at the end of 10 years or at the end where you remove a project. There is a requirement for public noticing and a public hearing for those tier 3 projects as well. Now, speaking a little harder to where you find info, like we do have a great website up at the moment. Well, it'll be up in perpetuity, and this is the landing page you'll be at. What you'll notice with this is there's actually quite a few up here at the top in the header, various places. So there's helpful documents in here, templates for maintenance, templates for construction and installation plans, examples of site plans and what we're looking for. And there's also guidelines that are abbreviated for how to place these objects and how to observe clearances around. Susan had a lovely diagram earlier on the required clearances for things, and we break that down for these amenities as well. Some FAQs, some funding questions, applications, and like ultimately the project types are all listed here. So I'm seeing another question. Hold on one moment.
Logan, I'd say finish with your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Robin. I'm going to push through and we're going to catalog everybody's questions and we will get back to them in writing. So kind of the general process, and this is more of a diagram base for you in the moment right now, is ultimately your application comes in. The analyst we talked about previews that submission. They ask for clarifying questions or additional info. They map that pathway to review for you. Your application then potentially goes into what's called plan check. And this is particularly necessary for any stamped drawings and particularly for the tier 3s. What we mean by stamped drawing is a civil engineer has placed a stamp on it. This isn't always required. Your analyst will let you know if that's not part of your packet, whether it does need to be required. There's the review itself. Public Works does our own internal reviews. We start inside the house and gather the feedback there. And then if there's significant changes, we get in touch with you to let you know about that. And then from there, if we need to, we also will send it on to external reviewers. So be that fire, MTA, PUC, other agencies that may need to provide their input or their review of a structure or an amenity. The hearing and the notification when necessary. For murals, this is notification to all property owners within 250 feet. We provide you with the letter, we provide you with the list of addresses, and it is up to you to then do that mailing and sign the affidavit stating that you have done that legally required mailing. For tier 3s, that's around the notification and the public hearing that are required. And once all of these things have kind of been complete, the maintenance and liability agreement that I mentioned is signed that binds you to that maintenance plan that you provided to us, as well as assuming that liability. And then the tier 3s also require that maintenance endowment. So this looks like a 5-step clear process, and ultimately it's pretty straightforward. The challenge is, of course, like everyone here wants me to give you a hard timeline. The range of projects, as you've seen, makes it really project dependent. So a plaque right now is averaging about 8 days a plaque. A mural is averaging about 2 months. But if somebody comes to us with a major landscaping project, it depends on the size of the area. It depends on all of the things they want to install. And so speaking really quickly to ultimately kind of a tier 2 example of a commemorative plaque, I'm not going to detail all of this out, but what I want you to see is there's a lot of individual steps that happen before submission. For example, the Board of Soups, the SF Arts Commission approving those, either whether it's the full CDR if it's a first time or an administrative review for a series. The application, our checks, what that means, making sure that all of the legal stuff is in order and that the BOS and the SFAC info matches. And then going through that process to get you the permit. Once the permit is issued, there's a pre-inspection of the site that happens, the install of your project, and then a post-install call to close out that inspection, or to have an inspection to close the permit out. There's no cost for that additional inspection. So do know that that permit fee I mentioned is all inclusive of the inspections and the reviews. You're not going to be hit with extra fees. There's an $11 Board of Appeals fee that applies to either 2 or 3. Digging in to show you this, details do matter. We talk a lot about give us the details, as many as you have. And in the conceptual phase, bring us on board so we can help you form that and point out what is or isn't important for your application. So a landscaping example exists here, kind of what's the difference between small drip irrigation and a flexible hose for no trip hazards and minimal space versus a new water meter and inch PVC piping that you're burying or excavating with sprinkler heads. Like that's a much larger scale project. So sometimes that will mean the distinction between a 2 and a 3. So please engage us early. Which brings me kind of the last piece, which we've been doing all along, which is questions. And we've hit 401, Robin. My apologies for kind of getting a little long-winded with some of that, but there's a lot of information I'm throwing out really fast.
Right. Thank you so much, Logan. There are a few questions that we didn't get to. One thing that I will respond to, and this was in the addendum that I posted yesterday. Logan mentioned tier 2 and tier 3, and he said, you're not going to want to do this. And that's because mostly tier 3 projects are not eligible for CCG. There's one exception. So the Lover Neighborhoods analysts will determine what tier that is when it falls under their jurisdiction, and when a project is not in the public right of way, then I will be determining that by working closely with Logan and saying like, well, if this were in the public right of way, would this be a tier 1 or tier 2? And then I make that decision. Thank you all for coming. There was a question about where these slides will be. So the recording, and I am going to collect slides from all the presenters today, will be available on the RFP website, which is sf.gov/FY26CCG. I want to thank you for your interest, and I want to thank my colleagues for the time that they put in to sharing out this information. We truly are better together. I hope that you all are inspired to apply for a community challenge grant, and see you out there. We've got a bunch more opportunities for you to learn about the program and from other city departments, so please join us. Thank you.